The Washington Post newsroom delivers breaking events around the world as they happen. Unrivaled reporting from the journalists you've come to trust. To get the facts fast and meet the challenges of today head on. Get the news that matters most with a special offer by visiting washingtonpost.com/watch. Subscribing unlocks instant access, bringing you the Post's award-winning coverage anytime, any place. Because democracy dies in darkness.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
He asked me to pay off an adult film star with whom he had an affair during the closing days of the presidential campaign.
The district attorney of New York was investigating me for something that is not a crime, not a misdemeanor, not an affair.
We have just gotten word former President Donald Trump has been indicted by a grand jury in New York.
First time in American history that a former president of the United States has been formally indicted in a criminal investigation.
We are looking at New York City, that is Trump Tower, where former President Donald Trump will soon depart as he gets into a motorcade and makes his way to the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse to turn himself in. This is a first for Trump and for the nation, witnessing this moment as he is the first former president in U.S. history to be indicted. Welcome to this special report from the newsroom of the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey. Well, a grand jury of 23 people voted to indict Trump Thursday. Today, we learn what charges the former president faces. This all comes as Trump ramps up his campaign to return to the White House in 2024, and he faces other criminal probes. I'm joined this afternoon by senior congressional correspondent Rhonda Colvin and opinions columnist James Hohman. Rhonda, let's talk through the timeline today and what we'll be witnessing, as well as what will happen behind the courtroom doors.
Well, the main event today is this 215 arraignment where the former president will have turned himself in and face a judge on the indictment. And we will learn, as the public, the world will learn what charges this grand jury voted to indict Mr. Trump on. And Trump himself and his lawyers will also find out as well. It will be unsealed. And so the whole world will be learning this all together. Late last night, the presiding judge over this case decided that cameras will not be able to be in there to broadcast live. So we will not see the actual hearing live, but there will be still photographers in there who will be able to get some of those moments by still photography. But there was so much interest in this, of course, because it's never happened. So everybody's watching the lead up. And we know, as you just said, that the former president will be leaving Trump Tower. He will be going to the courthouse. The judge did allow cameras to be in the courthouse hallways, so it's likely we might get a few snapshots of the former president. He may stop for cameras either going in or coming out. It's unknown really right now, but I think everybody's waiting to see what this looks like when a former president faces indictment or an arraignment. And then later today, we also expect Alvin Bragg, the DA in the case, to come forward and talk to press. That's around 3:45 p.m. And then later tonight at 8:15, we also expect the former president to address people.
And we will be here for all of that, Rhonda, bringing context, bringing facts to it, and just talking about how significant this is. James, put this in context for us.
This, Libby, shatters 234 years of an unwritten norm. We have had presidents who've gotten into criminal trouble before. Andrew Johnson was impeached, nearly convicted. Warren Harding was about to be charged in the Teapot Dome scandal, but died of a heart attack in office. Richard Nixon probably would have been charged in Watergate, but was pardoned by Gerald Ford. And now you, for the first time in 234 years, have a former president who is being indicted. And in some ways, this opens the floodgates. There are multiple investigations into Trump, and I think there was a hesitancy among a lot of these prosecutors to be the first person who did this, who sort of pulled this really big Band-Aid, and now I think it becomes a lot more likely that the former president is charged with wrongdoing in Fulton County, Georgia, related to trying to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia. And also at the federal level, the special counsel, Jack Smith, continues to look into Trump for obstruction of justice and for holding onto those top secret documents. So it's a huge moment. A lot of other democracies have their former leaders routinely charged and even jailed, but this has never happened in the United States before, and it's hard to imagine it's the last time it does.
On the right side of your screen, you can see their Trump Tower, and below me, you can see the courthouse where Trump will appear later today. Let's go now to Joyce Koh. She is live outside of the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse. Now, Joyce, you have been there for the last 2 weeks reporting about what it's been like. So talk to us about the scene and how the indictment played out last week, what you've witnessed as this historic moment is happening.
Well, the scene here, Libby, is an absolute media circus. There are hundreds and hundreds of members of the press, cameras everywhere, all just waiting to get a glimpse of former President Donald Trump when he arrives here at court, really any moment now. There are international, national, local press here. Everyone has been sort of gathered around this area, around Center Street, and the commotion really stretches for blocks surrounding the courthouse. This is really unlike what we had seen in the last 2 weeks. I had been down here for a couple of weeks, and there has been a steady media presence, but really this is unlike anything that I was personally imagining, having been down here and being a part of the steady media presence following that indictment as well. There were some protesters following the indictment, but today we saw a lot more activity in the park that sort of sits at the base of the courthouse. We saw some commotion once Marjorie Taylor Greene arrived, but really her voice being drowned out. We couldn't really hear what was going on because there were other counter-protesters and pro-Trump protesters over by that park. The police presence has also grown considerably. Even just within the last hour, they have pushed barricades further out to block pedestrians and other people from coming closer to court. The press is kind of cordoned off here, but you know, there's NYPD. We've seen Secret Service. Secret Service arrived inside the court building earlier this morning, so we're just waiting by to really see whether or not former President Trump comes down in this direction that we are anticipating around court.
Yeah, tell us more about that moment, Joyce, because we don't know, for security reasons, exactly how the president and former president will get down to the courthouse and what exactly we may see. So tell us more about what we're expecting today.
Yeah, so of course we expect that at some point within the next hour or so, probably even a little sooner, maybe half hour, President Trump is supposed to be getting into a motorcade, leaving Trump Tower and really traveling downtown here to the courthouse. And when he arrives, we're not sure exactly what entrance that he will be arriving to. We thought that it might be the side entrance that all the cameras are facing right now, but it could be really up in the air as to which entrance he actually comes into at court. He is expected to be arraigned around 2:15, so he's showing up a bit earlier than that 2:15 arraignment, and then that's supposed to last about 15 to 20 minutes. And following that, he is expected to leave straight from court and fly go to the airport to fly back to Florida for a press conference at Mar-a-Lago this evening.
Thanks so much, Joyce Koh. We'll continue to check in with Joyce as this day unfolds. And James, how significant is the decision by the judge regarding media coverage? Because, of course, groups like the Washington Post, news agencies, news outlets, were pressing for access. But that's because we want the American people and the global public, frankly, to get that access. So we'll only have some glimpses.
Yeah, I mean, the more that happens behind closed doors, the more likely conspiracy theories are to take root or wild speculation is to happen. And this is the rule of law at work. There is a process for what happens. And there have been other cases where cameras have been allowed in. Obviously, this is an especially newsworthy instance. And so, the Washington Post was one of 5 news organizations that went to this judge and said, allow cameras in to show, so people can see this proceeding. And the judge said no. Ultimately, we're going to see more than we would in a federal case, but less certainly than viewers would like.
Yeah, I just want to give some context because it will help people understand why we're getting information when we are getting it. Because one of the decisions the judge made is that the journalists who are able to go in and witness the proceedings. You know, some of them will be people who cover the courts all the time. This is a routine assignment any other day, but today, of course, it's extraordinary. They're not allowed to bring in electronic devices, Rhonda.
Right.
So, and they're used to that. They're used to abiding by those rules. But we won't be getting information like tweeted out or sent to us electronically in real time. We'll have to essentially wait and then get the information from the journalists who are inside.
Right, and I read through the judge's decision that he came out with last night. He seems to be a judge who really wants to make sure that this is, of course, it's a monumental occasion, really, and he did note that, but he also wants to make sure that that it's kept in an organized fashion, that it doesn't become that so-called circus. I will note that in typical proceedings in a situation like this in New York, cameras aren't usually allowed in. It is a public hearing, so there are members of the public that could stand in line and come in and watch this as well. But all of this also highlights how unprecedented this is. Everybody's been using that word all of this week because there is no roadmap for this. We don't know what it looks like. The Secret Service has had to figure out how do they serve a Secret Service protectee who is going into a courthouse with other people who are also facing arraignments or hearings today. There are so many people there. It's New York City. That's somewhat of a hard city to control because it's so public. There are people walking by as tourists. There are people going to work. It's a busy, busy center of a metropolis, and they're going to have to bring a former president through that. So a lot of this is uncharted territory, and I think we've seen that over the last few days with the comments from the Trump lawyers and the judges and the DA of how to really handle this.
Let's bring in Leanne Caldwell, co-author of the Early 202 newsletter. Leanne, welcome. Let's talk about the political ramifications of this. Okay, so we've been talking about the legal situation that Donald Trump is in, but let's talk, Leanne, about how this is reverberating here in Washington and beyond.
Yeah, so Libby, there's a couple things here. We're obviously watching what Republicans say about this. We know that Trump is doing everything to politically benefit him around this as much as possible. But what this has also done is that it has really forced a lot of the Republican Party to unite around the former president. And this was happening at a moment when we saw his support starting to slip. People were starting to move on to look at other presidential candidates. And now what a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill are doing is they're either coming to Trump's defense, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, or they're doing a step-down version of that by attacking the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg. But it is a way to stay on the good side of Trump's voters who are watching this closely. And then you look at what the Republican presidential candidates are saying, either the ones who are already in the presidential race or potential opponents as well. And a lot of them even have not broken with Trump on this issue. While they're not defending Trump specifically, they are attacking the entire process, calling this a witch hunt, calling this un-American. There's only one outspoken Republican so far, and that's former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who just announced his presidential run, who is coming out firmly against this, saying that Trump should drop out of the race, that this disqualifies him, Libby.
Yeah, Asa Hutchinson sort of stands alone on this one, in this case, Leanne. Let's talk about Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. You know, he stayed pretty quiet at first when some of the news about this, about a possible Trump indictment was evolving, when Trump was decrying this. And then Trump sort of forced it and pushed it and was pointing out that not everybody was rallying around him, so to speak. DeSantis, though, in his initial response, managed to both support Trump and slam the New York process, and yet also give a dig to Trump. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Ron DeSantis is an interesting, character in all of this. He's obviously the closest competitor to Donald Trump. Let's remind everyone that he has not announced a presidential run, but we all expect him to do so later this year. And DeSantis tried to walk that fine line. He knows he's in the same lane as Donald Trump. He needs the Donald Trump, the hardcore MAGA base in order to beat Donald Trump at his own game. And so what he did is he called the process un-American. But he also said, didn't come to Trump's defense and said that this is not activity that he would have engaged in. And so what we can point to right now is very, very early polling, which seems to be all over the place, really. You have some polling that came out yesterday by YouGov that says that Trump has increased his lead over Ron DeSantis by, it used to be an 8-point lead. Now it's 26-point lead. But then you have a Mason-Dixon poll today that came out just in Florida that polled Florida voters where Ron DeSantis is more popular than Trump. And so I don't think that we know what the political consequences of this is going to be just yet. This is a long road ahead. A trial, if it comes to that, will take place deep into the presidential campaign cycle. But what we do know is that Trump is going to do whatever he can to try to capitalize on this politically. He's already raised $8 million since the announcement of the grand jury indictment last Thursday, Libby.
Thank you, Leanne. James, some very important